Hey everyone, Piano Man Chuck here, and I have with me today the Kurzweil Forte, which is Kurzweil's latest offering in a stage piano. This is a completely different beast than its predecessor, the Artist. They've got brand new samples, completely new for piano and clavs and organs and electric pianos. And Kurzweil's thing has always been, their motto has always been, it's the sound. Well, in this, it really is the sound. So let's start out with this, and let's start out with the physical aspects of this first, because that's pretty important to a lot of people. This is going to go over what the functionality of the switches and the buttons and the layout is. So let's start out with the fact that when you have a keyboard like this and you have your pitch bend and modulation wheels to the left instead of above the keys, it adds length to the keyboard. So this keyboard happens to be 54 and a half inches wide, and it could have been 49 and a half inches. We've added 5 inches by putting the mod wheel and the pitch bend on the left instead of on top. So that is important to some people. Some people need to know that because it increases the length, and that determines about whether it's going to fit in their back seat or whether they have to put it in diagonally, folding the front seat of the passenger seat down and putting it in diagonally. Okay, so let's go through the ins and outs first. On the back panel, of course, you have your AC power and your AC power switch. Then you have your MIDI in, through, and out. And you have two sets of stereo outs, A and B, which is cool because you can send a set to your onstage monitors and another set to the front of house. Okay, the audio in is a little mini plug at stereo for your MP3 players or your iPhones or your tablets, so you can hook it up to here, play along with it or whatever. You've got two continuous controller inputs, things like expression pedals, and then you have three switch pedal inputs. One of those is dedicated to the sustain or damper pedal. Now, it's not a half damper or a variable. It is a switch, on off. And the pedal that comes with this, boy, that feels first class. I really love the pedal that comes with that. And then you've got your USB A and B type connectors. So you can do a lot of that, where one of them goes to storage like, a USB thumb drive, and the other one connects to your computer. Okay, now let's go through the knobs and switches, buttons, sliders, that kind of thing. We've already gone through the pitch bend and the modulation wheel that's on the left, but above them you have tap tempo, you've got transpose, up and down, and you have variation. Coming over here, you've got master volume on the very left, and the one thing I love the most are these dedicated knobs and buttons for EQ and compressor. So you've got an on-off switch for your EQ, and then you've got 4 knobs for your EQ. You've got high, you've got a sweepable mid-range, and you've got low. Then you have an on-off switch for your compressor and a knob that controls how much compression or how little you want. And I'll tell you, when you're performing live, this is what you want to control on the fly. You don't want to have to go to a menu to do that. So in this stage, it's kind of Nord-like. And it's really cool. And when you get to the sliders here, the last 4 sliders are dedicated to a little bit more things that you want to control on the fly when you're playing live, like reverb and delay. And you have effects 1 and effects 2, which is assignable, but you can control anything you want with that. I found, for me personally, what I use is the EQ, the compressor, and the reverb. And to have that all right here at my fingertips without going through a menu, that is a godsend. I love that. Okay, so now let's talk about the 9 switches above here and the 9 sliders. The 9 switches, the first 4 control the zones. Now you can have up to 4 zones here, and basically let's define what a zone is in this sense. When you have layers, which Kurzweil is calling a multi, you might have heard it called a combi with Korg. Kurzweil calls it a multi. You can layer up to 4 different sounds or instruments or patches, programs, whatever you want to call it, at once. Now, whatever you have layered, you can turn off or on each one of those with the first 4 switches labeled Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3, Zone 4. So whatever you have layered on the first, second, third, and fourth, you can turn it on or off. And the sliders beneath that, you can control how much or how little volume for each particular instrument that you've had layered on each of those zones. And to have that right next to each other, just like a mixing board, that's brilliant. A lot of people like to compare this to Nord. Yeah, you can do 3 with Nord, but your controls for volume and on-off are spread out at different parts of the board. At least you have that all together here, which is really cool. I love that. That is a good design philosophy there. Okay, now going on to the next 5, you've got some assignable switches, and if you look at the sliders beneath those switches, you can turn on or off the reverb slider, on or off the delay, on or off effects 2, on or off effects 1. Okay, now I might want to point out there, when you go to Kurzweil's version of Hammond's B3 called KB3, you get a little button called KB3 that lights up, and when that lights up, it means you're not using any of the 128 note polyphony that's built into this thing. It's kind of a freebie thing because it's handled all by its own processor, and the function of these switches and sliders changes to KB3 mode, which is listed in blue underneath the sliders and switches. When you're in KB3 mode, coming over here to what was the mod wheel now becomes the KB3 distortion wheel to control how much or how little distortion. And the variation switch now becomes the on and off switch to the Leslie. Then we come up here, the switches that are now controlled in KB3 mode amount to break, and then you have on off for chorus and vibrato, where you can control chorus or vibrato or depth. And then you have the percussion control. You can turn it on or off, loud or soft, decay, FS, and pitch, high, low. And you have key click. Now the sliders become the 9 stops for the organ. Now how cool is that? So just to give you an example, if you go to organ mode, and you'll see the first thing that comes up is a classic B3. If I just turn on the rotary and turn it off, so you can hear the difference there. And of course you know what the stops do if you play organ. So let's go back to piano. And let's finish off with the physical things with the buttons and switches. Okay. So you've got a nice 4-inch diagonal screen. It's color. You can see what you're doing. Unlike what everybody likes to compare this to, the Nord Stage 2, which has that little cigarette-sized LCD display, this is a nice 4-inch display. You can definitely see what you're doing here. Now, if you look over here, it's telling you what you've selected. Right now I've got a rich 9-foot grand, which translates to Hamburg Steinway D, 9 foot. Okay? All right, and it's really cool because they have 8 velocity layers and all that kind of stuff. That's one of the new things. Now, if I go to the next, I've got a rich 7-foot grand. Sounds a little different. And then the bright 9-foot grand, which is a Yamaha C7. Then we go to the 7-foot, and so on and so forth. But basically, I have other videos where you can hear all of the samples that are built into this. Go ahead and look for, on my channel, Kurzweil Forte demo samples, and I've got it broken up. So as we're going along, what's on the display here, and you see some labels over here, you have 6 soft switches over here, and they correspond to whatever is written on the screen at this point, octave minus, octave plus, so you can switch your whole keyboard an octave down or an octave up. Splits, layers, view, and edit. Now splits are easy to set up. When you press split, you're looking at a screen over here where you can split up to 4 parts of this keyboard. Not only can you tell it what you want on the bottom or the middle low or middle high or top high, or just split it into 2 layers where on the bottom you've got a acoustic bass and the top you've got a piano and so on and so forth. You can tell it where you want these split points, and you can layer these just by setting up splits up to 4 layers where you can overlap on certain parts as well. So let's get out of split mode. And when we go to layer mode, this is also easy to do too. You can see over here the first 2 they've got set up already. And what do we got? We've got a rich 9-foot grand with add a pad 2 is what it's labeled. So you got a piano and a pad labeled, layered together here. But it doesn't need to end there. You can add 2 more, and you can tell it the key range. You can pan these things to the left or the right. You can control the individual volumes of this. And again, you can do the panning and the individual volumes, all that kind of stuff. Also, when you are doing splits as well. So let's get out of here. And I'm going to skip view for a moment and go over to edit. When I press edit, I go to this edit mode where I can edit any one of these parameters for whatever sound I have selected, as well as the effects, and as well as some of the common parameters. So let's exit out of here. And what you're seeing here on the 9-foot grand, you don't have to view this screen different. If you press the view switch, what you get is a different view. You get this window into what sample is before and after it. So you can see the 5 samples that are before and the 5 samples that are after. So as you turn this knob here, you can see what you're getting. Some people like that better. I'm one of those people. I happen to like that better. And down below that, I've got 10 buttons labeled favorites. So anything I choose, whether it's a program, meaning any individual sample or patch or whatever you want to call it, let's suppose I modify that and I want to save that. I can save that as one of my favorites. Even if I'm doing layers, I can save a whole layer as one of my favorites as well. So that's a cool thing to have, especially when you're on stage. The exit button just takes you out of whatever function you're in as far as when you're editing something. Up, down, left, right, that deals with when you're in menus. And to change your sounds from any of these programs to another, there's a few ways to do it. You can do it with the left or the right buttons. You can do it with the up and down buttons. You can do it with the previous and the next buttons. Or you can do it with this big wheel right here. Okay, makes it easier to go a little bit further instead of just the next ones. You can just turn it and get to something that's 20 places beyond in just a fraction of a second. All right, then we get over here to the mode column. You've got a program and multi-switch. So when you press program, you are in program mode, meaning you get to choose what program or patch or voice or whatever you want to call it, instrument. Below that is multi. That's where you select your layers. Okay. Then you have global, so that you can go ahead and alter or set whatever global parameters you need to set with MIDI or anything else. Storage, you can choose whether you want to do storage on your USB flash drive that you've put into here, or onto your computer, as long as you have a USB cable hooked up between here and your computer. And then you have category. You've got 20 category switches: piano, electric piano, clav, organ, leads, pads, synths, synth bass, strings, bass, winds, ensemble, guitar, bass, drums, percussion, voices, mallets, hybrid, and miscellaneous. So when I choose, right now I'm in piano mode. If I choose electric piano, I go to the first thing in the electric piano section. If I choose clavinet, I go to the first instrument of the clavinet section. If I choose organ, I go to the first instrument of the organ section. Now, from there I can go up or down or whatever to the next or previous instrument. But what's nice about this, the way it's set up, is when I press piano, the first thing that comes up is the rich 9-foot grand. Now let's say I don't want that to come up, and I don't want to waste one of my favorites putting in something that I do want to come up with. So let's say I like the solo 9-foot grand the best. What I do is I press and hold that category button. All right. So now I've chosen winds. I've gone to winds. The next time I come back to piano, I'm back to my solo 9-foot grand. And that is a cool thing because that kind of adds 20 more little memory positions for everything here. But let me go back to the default here. I want to go back to the 9-foot grand. I just select that. I press and hold the category button for piano, and I'm back to that. Let me show you if I go back to percussion and then back to piano. Now I'm back to the rich 9-foot grand. So that's cool. Now there's a lot of other things that this can do. I'm not going to get into everything here. But what this incorporates is something that Kurzweil calls flash play. Now they got a 16 gigabyte flash drive here, which all the samples are stored on. And for the pianos, I mean, they're using like 4 gigabytes of that drive. Now, what's really cool is when you go to another sample, there's no loading time. It's instant. Now, flash play, it's new for Kurzweil. It's new for any stage piano on the market except for Korg. Korg came up with their equivalent of flash play. It's streaming from their SSD drives. They came up with that in 2011 and first used it on the Korg Kronos. So aside from that, Kurzweil is the only other company that came up with that technology. It's really cool. Now, as far as a stage piano, this is what I would want to take when I'm gigging with a band. This makes it so much easier to go from one instrument selection to another or from one layer selection to another than the Nord Stage 2 that everybody compares everything with. It's so difficult, at least for me or anybody else that's not familiar with a generic approach, to go from one sample to another. This is so easy. And the sounds to die for. Kurzweil has definitely lived up to their motto, it's the sound. Piano Man Chuck, peace out. Thanks for watching.